Hi, all remote learners. So today we're going to be doing is reading in our StemScopedia book. This is over producers, consumers, and food webs. So we're going to go and read our chapter in this for this unit, and then we are going to be going over our vocabulary. And then you will go into Teams, answer your forms based off of your vocabulary and what we have read throughout this unit. So let's go ahead and get started. So you can read the unit separately, or you can listen to this audio of it, and it will have I will have this attached, and I will also have the vocabulary words attached with it. So let's go ahead and get started. Think about the last meal you ate. Where did the food come from? Maybe it came from the grocery store or a restaurant. Maybe it came from your backyard. Now think of a lion living on the plains of Africa. Where do you think his last meal came from? Definitely not the grocery store. Lions have to hunt for their food. Most humans do not hunt for their food, but humans are lions. But humans and lions have something in common. Both eat other living things. In this way, humans and lions have a similar relationship to their ecosystem. In fact, scientists group living things based on how they get food. By seeing how organisms get food, scientists understand how energy moves through an ecosystem. This flow of energy from one organism to the next forms a food chain. What are some types of food in a food chain? What happens if some of these food sources change or disappear? This is very important to think about for this unit. So we're going to continue on reading. What are producers? What do they need to make their food? Some living things make their own food. These organisms are called producers. Plants are producers. They use sunlight, water, and a gas called carbon dioxide to make sugars. Plants use these sugars for energy to grow and survive. Producers are always the first organism in a food chain. They provide energy for other living things in the food chain. Even though not all animals eat producers, all animals rely on producers to change sunlight into usable energy. So we have these different bold vocabulary that were inside our chapter so far. And ecosystem is a community of living and non-living things in their natural environment. That is what an ecosystem is. Next one is organism, a living thing. So we are an organism, anything that is a living thing. So next is energy. We've learned about energy already, and we continue to use energy throughout our science. So again, energy, what is needed to do work or cause change. So let's continue on to talk about consumers. What are consumers? Where do they get their food? Many living things cannot make their own food. These organisms are called consumers. If they don't make their own food, where do you think they get it? Where do you think it comes from? Consumers get energy by eating other organisms. There are different types of consumers. Some consumers are herbivores. Herbivores are only plants or other plant-like producers called algae. Other consumers called carnivores eat only other animals. Some consumers eat both plants and other animals. These consumers are called omnivores. We have learned about producers, and we've learned about our consumers and the different types. So let's continue on. What do you think? People are consumers, not producers, because they eat other organisms. Think about the things people eat. What type of consumers are we? Are people carnivores, herbivores, or omnivores? Do you think some people might be in different categories? Why? So that's something to think about. There are different people, they may be vegetarians, so they only eat certain things. There could be vegans, there could be all sorts of things when it comes to what classification of a consumer they are. There could be, carnivores like we have here. We have, herbivores, which are just plant eating animals or consumers. And then we have omnivores that eat both plant and animals. So we really have to think about that. Not every category is the same. So really think about that and reflect on that. Let's continue on. Where does the energy that starts at food chain come from? As one organism eats another, energy moves through a food chain. But where does the energy first come from? The energy that starts a food chain comes from the sun. Producers use sunlight to make energy that other organisms can use. Can you make your own food by sitting in the sun? Not at all. When a consumer, such as yourself, eat plants, the energy that first came from the sun passes on to the consumer. When another consumer eats the plant eater, the energy passes on again. What is a food web? In a food chain, the energy seems to flow in a straight line from one organism to the next. In reality, though, energy in an ecosystem flows in many directions because most consumers rely on more than one type of food. For this reason, a food web is a better way to show these relationships. A food web is a connection of food chains with many food energy pass in an ecosystem. Just as in a food chain, the energy that starts a food web comes from the sun. In the food web shown on the next page, the sun's energy flows to algae. The algae makes their own food using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. Next, the energy flows to organisms that eat algae, such as minnows. Let me move this up so I can see it. Insect larvae and snails. Then the energy flows to larger consumers such as bass, sunfish, and snapper turtles. So we're going to go ahead, and this is just to help you out with what larva is the young newly hatched form of certain insects. So that's just a young hatched form of insect. So what they were just talking about here is that it started off with the sun, then it went to algae. So from algae, you could have larvae, you could have minnows, and then you had a snail, right? So we can branch off from that, and we can have the larva go to a minnow. The larva can be eaten by a sunfish. The snail can be eaten by a sunfish. And so we can see the food chain, and we've learned about this already. It's just to better understand what they're talking about. So let's look at lookout. The arrow in a food web diagram shows the flow of the energy. The first arrow always starts at the sun, which is the source of energy. The arrow points to the next organism that uses the energy. This means arrow points from the source of the energy to whatever consumes that energy. For example, the arrow that points from snails to sunfish shows that the snail provides energy to sunfish, which means we start off with our main source, then it moves on for our energy to the next, whatever that is eating. So we can see that the sunfish is getting the snail energy because of what it's consumed. So let's go ahead and continue on. We're going to skip over try now. So let's continue with look out. How do changes in an ecosystem affect a food web in an ecosystem? Changes to an ecosystem can affect the flow of energy in food webs. Sometimes an ecosystem experiences a drought. When this happens, cannot get enough water and can um, many plants cannot get enough water and can perish or die. Animals are affected by drought too. Some animals can um, moving survive by moving to new areas. Other animals will die out due to natural disasters. Events such as hurricanes, fires, and floods can quickly change an environment. These changes may cause organisms to perish or move to another area. They may also cause new organisms to move into or grow in an area. For example, when an area floods, many land animals are forced to move. If the flood continues, a new habitat, such as a lake, animals such as frogs and fish will survive and grow in the area. Looking to the future, the golden cheeked warble in danger. In many cases, human actions change ecosystems. For example, humans cut down junipers, a oak tree in central Texas. These trees are home to a type of bird called golden cheeked. It's a tongue twister, sorry guys. Warbler. Now the birds are in danger because they are losing their living spaces. Today, there are only about 2,100 golden-cheeked warblers. If the birds become extinct, the ecosystem will change even more. So these birds eat insects such as caterpillars and beetles. This happens to control the insect population. If the warblers population decreases, the number of insects will grow. Think about how having more insects will change the plants in the forest. Caterpillars and beetles eat the plants of many different plants. If too many insects live in an area, they will eat way more of the plants. Fortunately, many people are working to protect the golden-cheeked warblers. The warblers now have a protected national wildfire area in Texas. This protection helps keep some balance in the warblers' food web. So this is something very important because we don't want this animal become extinct. And extinct means that having no living members at all. So that makes sure that we need to have that. So this bird right here can stay with us. So let's go ahead and go to our vocabulary. So we're moving on to our vocabulary. So we're going to start with carnivore. We learned about carnivores, but we're going to continue and stress over the consumers that we have. So a carnivore is an organism that gets energy by eating only animals. That is a carnivore. Next is a consumer. So a consumer, there's 3 different types of consumers that we have. So an organism that gets energy from eating plants or animals. Ecosystem, all living and non-living things and all their interactions in an area. So this is what the picture shows of an ecosystem. So the non-living and living things that are interacting in an area. Food web. So it's an interconnected set of food chains. We did learn about this and we did make a food web last week. So it will help us understand all this information. A herbivore.